Glad you chose to keep it on Rwanda television programs. Greetings to you from wherever you are in Rwanda or outside Rwanda. And of course, welcome to 360 Degrees, a show where we talk about, different stuff, where we bring topics to the table and, talk about them. And of course, today, as we celebrate this year's Women's Day, we'll be talking about the break the bias, women in entrepreneurship, and I won't be alone on the show, as I am joined by Sarah Ledum. She's the CEO of Inhomoko, COO actually. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Glad to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited about International Women's Day. I've seen lots of buzz around and really looking forward to contributing to the conversation. So
Thanks
for having me.
First of all, happy Wednesday.
Thank you. You too.
By the way, so we also celebrate women. So
for sure.
Thank you very much. I just introduced you. You're the CEO of Inhomoko, but other than knowing that you're Sarah Ledum, the CEO of Inhomoko, let's start with a proper introduction. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So again, my name is Sarah. I have been in Rwanda for almost 10 years, working with the team at Inhomoko, and we do business advisory. I'm super passionate about business, and I think that it's a great opportunity for people to use business to improve their lives and their communities. And glad to have the chance to do this work with my really awesome team.
Okay, 10 years is really a long period of time. So how
it is.
The business community, the business environment locally, how has it been?
Yeah, when we first started in Inhomoko, it was basically writing business plans for students and setting up websites. And 10 years later, we've worked with more than 30,000 entrepreneurs. We've got offices all across the country. And we have a team of more than 100 people in Rwanda who are delivering services. And what that shows me is that not only have we been able to grow as a business, but there is continuing demand for what we offer. So to see more investment coming into businesses, right now, what we're really passionate about is also the secondary cities across Rwanda. So Bugesera and Huye and Musanze, to see opportunities to work with entrepreneurs who are even outside of Kigali. So I think it's been great to be in Rwanda and do this work here. And I think there's a lot more work still to do to support entrepreneurs.
All right. Of course, as we talk about this, what prompted you to start working with entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
How did you come up with the initiative in general?
Yeah. Actually, it was through meeting a young person who had a lot of great ideas and needed some support to turn those ideas from a vision into reality, right? We all sometimes need that support where you've got a vision and then how do you actually make it happen? So I had been living in San Francisco, and in San Francisco, there are a lot of business advisors, there are a lot of financial resources, there's a really well-developed infrastructure around supporting businesses to grow, particularly, as everybody knows, tech entrepreneurs. And we kept meeting young people over and over and over again who were super passionate, had great ideas, but just couldn't access the resources that they needed. So it was really not so much that I said, I want to work with entrepreneurs, but it was entrepreneurs saying like, hey there, like, we're ready to grow, we want to do this, and to be able to facilitate some of their growth.
All right. Of course, we're celebrating the Women's Day, and having worked with entrepreneurs for quite some time, be it here in Rwanda and across the region as well, how do you find women entrepreneurship today?
Yeah, I think women's entrepreneurship is a mixed bag. We see a lot of strong businesses run by women, and we also know that women often face multiple different challenges to growing their business. So when you look at the flow of investment capital, there's still not nearly enough going to women's businesses. So there's a disproportionate investment between women's businesses and businesses run by men. There are for women who often have multiple responsibilities at home and in the business, there are trade-offs that you also find yourself making at times. So I think there are some really amazing businesses run by women, and also navigating the business environment and the social environment can sometimes be an extra challenge for women's business growth.
Yeah, sure. We've been talking about this, of course, as we celebrate this year's Women's Day under the theme break the bias, as we've been doing it. What are the major biases that you see around women being successful entrepreneurs, around the society themselves as well? What are the biases you've experienced maybe, or you've faced along the way?
Yeah. I love that you're asking this question, because I think sometimes we skip ahead to the breaking part, right? Like, let's break through. But to take a minute just to really acknowledge that bias actually does exist, I think is also an important part of advancing all of us, is just also to acknowledge that there are still challenges for women in business.
Sure.
I mean, right now we see a lot of women starting to grow in tech companies. I think there's still that's still an area where there's not enough women. So there could be times when a woman entrepreneur who's a tech entrepreneur, she could be the only person in the room who is focused on tech, right? So there could be questions for herself like, do I belong here, right? There could be people saying, oh, does she belong here? I think, Rwanda is so good around promoting women's equality, making sure policies are in place for that. And yet, nonetheless, anywhere in the world, we all look at the way that biases show up for women.
Yeah, sure.
And it's just, unfortunately, still a fact of life and a consideration that women have to negotiate when growing their businesses.
Can we say these biases are just, if I could say, inner created, or just created by women themselves, or is it just the society? Where do these biases come from, and where can we pinpoint to break the biases?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, the definition of bias is around having a preconceived notion, right? We all have biases about different things.
Yes.
And it isn't necessarily an intentional desire to discriminate or an intentional desire to be prejudiced against somebody. But it can be just messages that we all grow up with around what we think is possible for people, right? You can have a preconceived notion that's a good one or a bad one.
Sure.
And so I think even for women, we all live in the same society together, so we all hear the same messages. So the messages that men may hear about what's possible for women, women hear those messages too. And so I think the challenge for both women and men is to break out of thinking that may not actually be real anymore, right? Or that it may be a stereotype, but it's not actually what's really happening. So I think it's important for both women and men to check those.
Sure. Do you really think it is possible to break these biases, and what do you think needs to be done to concretely break the biases?
Yeah. No, I do actually really think that it's possible to break biases. And the first thing that has to happen is people need to be intentional about understanding where bias exists, right? You can't overcome something if you think everything's fine. So identifying what that bias is. The second thing is being open to seeing things in a different perspective. I think being really curious is a great way to approach it, right? Like, if I had a bias against somebody, one way for me to overcome that is to sort of, with a curious mindset, to actually explore that, right? Like to say, okay, are all women in tech worse than men in tech, right? And so then, like, okay, well, let me go see, let me talk to some women in tech, right? So I think being curious, trying to really understand what's real is important. And I think also being humble and willing to change, right? I think that's the hard part, is acknowledging for ourselves, oh wow, I might have had a bias, and being a little embarrassed by that, being a little bit vulnerable to have to admit that you're changing your mind about something. And that, I think, it really is where a lot of the work has to come in for ourselves to be able to be part of the solution of breaking bias.
All right. And, talking about these from a point of experience at Inhomoko, what do you practically do to break those biases from workplace and from different clients you've worked with? What do you do and how do you do it?
Yeah. So my job as COO means that I'm responsible for managing elements inside of Inhomoko, as well as working with the teams that are serving clients. So at Inhomoko, we do training, consulting, and access to finance. And then we also have to run a company which has fairness and justice and inclusion as part of our day-to-day company. So the first thing that I need to do as a leader inside Inhomoko is make sure that we are putting into practice good policies. So for example, in addition to strong maternity leave policies, we also have paternity leave because we want men to be able to support their families when there's a new baby. Or we make sure that there are mental health services. We saw for a lot of our female staff being at home during COVID and balancing the responsibilities of working from home as well as taking care of kids was really draining. So, having those support systems. So the first thing I can do before giving any advice to anybody is make sure that we're doing what we need to do internally, have equal pay for equal work for women, all of those things. The next thing in thinking about the entrepreneurs that we work with is also making sure that we're really thoughtful around what services are going to be appropriate for women. For example, if a woman wants to take out a loan, and we do direct investments, so we do financing for women's businesses, among men's businesses as well, but are we asking that woman, is your husband also going to co-sign this for you? Or, can you put forward collateral where the house may be in her husband's name? So thinking about ways that there are barriers that exist in women's access to finance or women's access to training and consulting. Like we have women who bring their kids to our trainings, right? And they're welcome. So just making sure that we put in practice in our services to women entrepreneurs, things that are also not going to be additional barriers for them getting what they need to grow their business.
As we talk about this, breaking the bias, empowering women in general, what do you think is the role, or what do you think, different policymakers here talk about, governments, non-government organizations, even the private sector as well, in regards to breaking the bias we're talking about, but also empowering women, mostly those in entrepreneurship?
I had a conversation with a friend earlier today and said that I was going to be talking with you. And I said, okay, what's the important thing that you want to make sure that people hear around women's empowerment? And I loved the answer that she gave me, which was, really celebrating women's visions. And so when you have policymakers or NGOs or private sector really understanding what your customer wants. And if you're to see a woman as like a key stakeholder in all of these decisions, it's not so much that the policy maker is making a decision for a woman or the NGO is doing something for a woman, but they're actually embracing the vision that women have for their own selves and their own communities. And so making sure that women have a seat at the table. There's a labor union saying in the US that says, nothing about us without us is for us. And
nothing
so it's
about
that
us?
Nothing about us without us is for us.
Sure.
So that notion of the people who are most impacted by those policies, that they have a seat at the table for that as well. I think Rwanda does a really great job of that, right? When we look at the representation of women in business and representation of women in government. And then there's always still, it's just as all of the rest of us continue to make daily decisions, is the voice of women involved in those decisions? Is the vision of women for what they want for their communities and their businesses at the table?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think much as, different policymakers, different stakeholders that we've been talking about, need to have a role in this. I think also women have a great role to play in their empowerment.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Sam, I don't know many women who aren't empowered, to be honest with you. The women.
For real?
Yeah. The women that I know who are running businesses, who are going to school, who are taking care of their families, that, to me, there's a level of strength there, whether we want to call it empowerment or not, but everywhere we look, women are taking care of business. And certainly there are things that are stacked against women where it can bring them down, and that it may take an extra amount of energy or an extra to be able to keep going some days. But I don't know. I mean, you probably have a lot of women role models in your life. I do, and I can look at the people that I work with. I can look at the women who are entrepreneurs, and nobody is going to empower them. They are going to look within themselves and decide, look at me, I have strength, I have vision, and it has to come from within. So I see that all over the place. Super strong women everywhere.
Yeah, sure. And as we almost draw closer to the end of this interesting conversation. I would like to ask, what advice would you give to a young girl out there who is dreaming of becoming a successful CEO or CEO like you, or even become an entrepreneur in general? What is your advice to them?
Yeah, I think it's important to have big vision and take small steps, right? So you don't have to wake up one day and say, I'm going to be the COO, and then it's there. Or you don't have to wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a successful entrepreneur, and it's there. It's important to have that vision and every day work towards it. So whether it's starting with a small shop, whether it's getting an internship and having increasing responsibilities because you're putting yourself forward to say, okay, I'm going to take the next challenge and I'm going to be proactive. We are also always hiring, so my HR director would be disappointed with me if I didn't also let people know that they can look for jobs with us. We're hiring 86 roles this year, and so come to the Inhomico website and check out those roles if you think that you're a good fit. But
I'll do that immediately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe the ladies, Sam. Maybe the ladies.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean. I think women can find pathways of growth for themselves, find a mentor, don't be afraid to fail, test out different ideas, put yourself in conversations with people that you admire, and that's the way you'll continue to grow towards being who you want to be.
By the way, what are your thoughts on having mentorship in regards to entrepreneurship in general?
I think there's a lot of people who want mentors, but I think a mentorship relationship is, there has to be some chemistry there, right? It's not just that you say, oh, hi there, I met you once, will you be my mentor? But really it's, I am impressed with you, person who is running XYZ business, and I know that you're doing these things that I need to learn. So having a mentor also means that you have some awareness of what your own gaps are, and you're finding the right fit with somebody else who can help you fill those gaps. So there has to be that chemistry, and there has to be that connection, and it has to be mutually beneficial, right? Just as a mentee saying, oh, I'm going to take from you, you mentor me. But I think as a mentee, you can also talk about what you're offering to your mentor. Maybe your mentor is running a business and they need to have an understanding of a youth perspective, right? So then you end up in this more of an exchange where it becomes a longer standing relationship because it's not just one way, right? Anytime we have one-way relationships, those don't really last very long, right?
Yeah, sure.
In any part of our lives. So having that give and take can be really important in finding the right mentor-mentee relationship.
All right. Before I go to, a set of, rapid fire questions,
Sure.
if I could call them that way. Regarding women entrepreneurship, regarding women empowerment and in general, where do you think is still the gap? In our societies, in our region,
Yeah.
in Rwanda as well, where do you think is the gap that, different stakeholders, around women empowerment, around entrepreneurship in general should put in a lot of efforts, to break these and, bring them up as that's what we need.
I think we need more spaces for women's voices, and so I'm really appreciative, Sam, for you to have me here. And we always try to elevate the voices of the entrepreneurs that we serve. And so I think people need to just see women's entrepreneurship, see their accomplishments, be willing to invest in those. Success for a women's business may look different than success for a business run by a man. I mean, maybe she is looking at social impact in a different way. So I think seeing what is possible for women and what they're doing is still a gap. Financing, let's not underestimate that. Everybody is looking for financing. So I appreciate for men, women, micro businesses, rural businesses, everybody is still looking for access to affordable, flexible financing. And I know that's a pain point for almost every entrepreneur we talk to. When we look at women's success rates and where investment happens, the gap for women is even greater still. So there is something there structurally or some bias, which is still creating an inequity. So I would say those are the areas that still are, see women as good investments, understand what drives them, and be willing to invest in their work.
All right. Now to a set of rapid fire questions.
Think fast.
No, this will just be fun.
Okay.
All right. First of all, what motivates you most? Like every day, every moment, what motivates you?
My team motivates me. We have a really amazing team, and their happiness motivates me.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received, surround yourself with people who are smarter than you.
Okay. Find people.
Find people who are smarter than you and surround yourself with them.
Okay, I like the idea. I mean, the advice as well. What do you wish to have learned sooner?
What do I wish I have learned sooner? Definitely Kenya, Rwanda. But also...
do you try it or?
Gikea. More. But I think it's important to let people be who they are, and just accept people for what they bring to the table, since there's some gift in every person. So I wish I had learned that sooner.
What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear? My biggest fear? That's a good question. There's not much that I'm afraid of, and not because I am brave, but because I have conviction in the work that we're doing. So, in my mind of like, am I worried that the organization is going to fail, or am I worried that something's going to happen? I think that our team comes together every day to push through a lot of barriers because we're all really committed to do this work. So sometimes our work is complicated, sometimes it's messy, but I am not afraid that we are going to find a path together.
All right. What do you think is the key to living a good life?
The key to living a good life, try something every day that makes you feel alive. Like eat something different, talk to a stranger, just do something that makes you feel connected to the world around you.
Finally, what do you think about YOLO? You only live once.
What do I think about what?
You only live once. They're saying that, you only live once and you gotta do whatever you gotta do.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
I mean, yeah, you only live once, and hopefully if you do it right, once is enough. And I think that even though we only live once, we can have many different varied experiences within one life. right?
Okay.
There are seasons for everything. Maybe it's the season for family, maybe it's the season for education, maybe it's the season for failing, maybe it's the season for humility. So it may be one life, but I think there are many seasons.
All right. So we're finally coming to the end of this interesting conversation, as I just said. But as we're celebrating this year's Women's Day, what is your message to all the young ladies, to all the women out there, be it entrepreneurs, be it those in different institutions, be it those in the private sector, construction, everywhere?
Yeah.
What's your advice and what's your message as we celebrate this year's Women's Day?
Yeah. My message to women would be to really celebrate yourselves and celebrate each other. And women have the opportunity to support each other, to come together in a really powerful way to create change in their communities. And I would say to women, believe in yourself and do what you need to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam.
As we conclude, can I give you an opportunity to ask me a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Sam, what do you think about International Women's Day?
Well, International Women's Day, it's so amazing to celebrate women. I always say women give life, women create life. So I mean, we need to celebrate women every day, not just socially, but also in different, professional categories, let it be in business, entrepreneurship, and everything. So women, I believe women, other than the biases that existed now and, so long time ago, that maybe women are incapable of some things, they're actually more than even capable, more than we even think. So it's just, breaking the bias and, knowing they can and they will.
Yeah. That's awesome. When I said, I have women role models, and you said, me too, who are some of your women role models?
Rwanda's First Lady, Her Excellency Jeanette Kagame, and also former Rwanda's Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Mrs. Louise Mushikiwabo. She's currently heading the Organisation Internationale Francophonie. So those are my women role models.
I think those are two amazing women role models.
Yeah,
for sure.
real, for real.
For sure.
Yeah, so that was it.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for being with us on the show.
Pleasure.
Any last remarks?
I'm grateful for the conversation, and I think in terms of last remarks, we have chosen the month of March and March 8th as International Women's Day and International Women's Month, but it's really an opportunity every single day for women to be celebrated, to have opportunity for us to do the work that we all need to do every day to break bias. So hopefully March 8th is a kickoff always for some new reflections, but hopefully it will continue as the year goes on.
Thank you very much once again.
Thanks, Sam.
And of course, this brings us to the end of our conversation. Thank you very much for being with us on Rwanda Television. And of course, once again, let me say Happy Women's Day to all the ladies, actually even men out there. Let's keep on celebrating women each and every day. Let's keep on supporting them. And of course, as we break the bias, mostly this time around for women in entrepreneurship. So until we meet next time, stay safe and goodbye.